And we're live. Jake, good morning from the car.
Danimal, pleasure.
How are you?
I'm good. Why are we doing this on a Friday morning? The listeners need to hear.
Yeah, so yesterday, we always plan to talk on Thursday night. It's a great kind of end of the week into the Friday. One of my coworkers calls Thursday Friday Eve, which I thought was interesting. But anyways, so because I got out here, my bank account, Santander, my checking and savings account is in Mass. They're not really out here. It's Wells Fargo, Bank of America. So like, perfect. I'll open up my account, go to the first Wells Fargo, close. Takes 10 minutes to get there just because of traffic. It should only be a 2-minute ride. Then I go to the next Wells Fargo. So everyone who went to the first one that I wanted to go to ended up all going there. The people that you have to see to open up the account were too busy. So I sat there for like 10 minutes, said, screw this. Then went to Bank of America down the road. Now we're about 45 minutes into a trip just to open up a bank account. Go to that Bank of America, try to open up the door, closed. So then I have to go to another Bank of America, get in there, go through the whole process, and then like 3/4 of the way done into it, they're like, do you just have like a passport or some type of verification? Didn't have it on hand. And so I'm driving home, an hour wasted of just trying to simply open up a bank account. Flat tire. Yeah, you can't make this up. So
I gotta be honest.
Yeah. I'm done. It's over. This is where the mindset comes in.
Yeah.
It happened. We're over it. We're here. We got the espresso. We have a wonderful guest with us. Jake, I love when you do these from the car. It's actually awesome. This might be a great way to just keep the podcast going, only from the car.
Yeah. Well, I was telling you, like, Fridays, this is a great way to do my Friday. I crush my workout. The endorphins are rolling. And then I come in, I'm talking to you. We always get a solid guest on here. We get to shoot the shit. The car gives some good scenery too. It's like,
I like it.
We got another car, my trunk, I'm dark. It's just different. But yeah, enough about us. It's always about us. Let's welcome our guest. This is, for the listeners, it's actually the first time we've had a recommendation from a previous guest. So our buddy Zach Gross, which was a lovely podcast, introduced us to Mike. And Mike is a physical therapist, and we would like to open the floor to him. Thank you very much for being here, brother. If you want to introduce yourself to the guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. So I'm Mike. I am a physical therapist from UMass Lowell, and I've been friends with Zach Gross since the beginning of undergrad. So I was psyched that he gave me the shout out to come on here with you guys.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Car vibes. No, it's really great. Zach, I mean, he had led us to your content, had told us that you're kind of doing a little more of a niche thing in physical therapy, which I really want to discuss with the listeners, because at least from a medical perspective and a training perspective, that parallel, it's honestly fascinating. And I think similar to Clash, when we had them on, you're kind of breaking the mold. It's cool. And Zach couldn't have had nicer things to say about you. So I'm really excited to get to hear a bit about your story. And I think it'll be beneficial for the listeners. Dan, I cut you off though. So if you want to.
No worries. No worries. For the listeners as well, Mike owns his own business called Rise Above Physical Therapy. We're going to get into that whole story as why he started. But his message kind of resonated with us because, like Jake, you said, Sarah and Ashlyn, who are a part of Clash Physical Therapy back in Worcester, Mass. You know, they had been in the physical therapy space for a while, saw a couple things they didn't like, and began their own practice to be a bit more proactive in their care, knowing about the insurance rules and all these different things that I'm not fully aware of, and some other patients and other physical therapists aren't either, as they're learning. So I thought it was very brave for Mike, getting out of school and doing it immediately at a young age. I think it's so brave, and I'm very happy to have you on. I love picking an entrepreneur's brain as well, with a good message. So let's dial it back to maybe like high school. Did you grow up playing sports? How did we get into physical therapy, and just make it organic storyline?
Yeah, of course. So like most PTs, I definitely grew up playing sports, 3 sports for a while. And then I slowly sort of tailored off. I had to start making money. So I eventually, ended up just playing baseball going into my senior year. And, I ended up dealing with shoulder pain. It was preventing me from really like working out and doing the things that I loved. And I was sort of transitioning that way anyway. I was kind of leaving sports behind, and I really just wanted to work out, and I really couldn't do that because of my shoulder pain. So I ended up seeing both the patient and the physical therapist perspective. So I think that really kind of pushed me as well to break away from that insurance mold, because I've been on both sides and it really just didn't work as well. So basically, I ended up going to the typical insurance-based physical therapist office for my shoulder pain. They ended up giving me the typical, strengthening and stretching exercises, and it just wasn't getting me back to like 100%. And I was already in grad school at the point. So I had already, done my own research and seen these exercises before. So I actually got recommended by one of my professors to go see Dr. Brett Scott at Barbell Physical Therapy. And he actually made the difference in getting me back to 100% and getting back to like lifting the way I wanted to. So he was actually fresh out of grad school as well at that time, and he owned his own cash-based practice. And I just thought to myself, like, this is awesome. Like, this is what I want to do. Like, how do I make this happen? And that's where the gears started turning is, he's so young and he's already he's already opened up his own clinic and he's helped me get back to 100%. There's something different here going on. And then going back into my clinical rotations, you can really just see how the quality of treatment kind of diminishes just being based in an insurance clinic. And it has nothing to do with the therapist. It's more so that insurance kind of just ties your hands in the time and like type of treatment that you can provide. Did you have a question?
No, not at all. Keep going. Everything you're saying is fantastic. I just have some comments I'll make after.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, I found that insurance was really like tying my hands in the terms of like types of treatment and how far you can get people back. And I think that was what really resonated with me and really struck home was, I was at that 80 or 90% mark, and I really just wanted to get back to like pushing weight and like, being able to do the things that I wanted to do with my own, like well-being and wellness. And insurance really kind of just kicks you out the door once you hit 90%, because they just want to make sure that you're like functional, quote unquote. So seeing both sides of that, I knew I needed to like break that mold and get into a space where I could help people get all the way back to the activities that they love.
Yeah, Mike, you really hit it on the head with the very end of it. And I was actually just going to make the comment that you had said a lot of times in insurance-based physical therapy. So I work for Atrius Health. This is one of these like larger groups, and I've been to PT there. I would argue that the time constraints are just, for lack of a better term, utter bullshit. It doesn't make any sense, because physical therapist's job is to get people, like you said, back to performance, but oftentimes they stop at the rehabilitative phase. So it's like, we have rehabbed the structure, but like you said, that's only 80 or 90%. And so it's every physical therapist like you that's kind of pushing to say, I want people to get back to the gym. That's the mindset that we need. I want to parlay into a post on your Instagram Zach had sent me, because I think it's a cool segue. You had one of your buddies there who had gotten, he was doing a single arm shoulder press, and I forget his name, but you were discussing an imaging report that he had received, basically saying structural damage, you're screwed. For in layman's terms, do you want to talk about that and what your strategy was in getting him to be able to overhead press?
Yeah, of course. So saying that is a great segue because he was in the same boat as me. He got back to that kind of 90%, but he couldn't do the things that he really wanted to. So, you know, there's a lot of new research coming out that shows that imaging doesn't correlate well with pain at all. So it's always been associated that tissue damage is what causes pain. That's just not true. It's been debunked a ton of times. So basically a lot of what we did together was kind of a de-education of these doctors told him here, like, it's easy to point on an image and be like, this is what's causing your pain. This is what's going to make it hard to get back to what you want to do. So a lot of it was de-education on, like, our bodies are resilient, and it's not a make or break that there's a little tear in your rotator cuff. There's been a ton of people who perform at a very high level who have tears. So that was part of it, is just reintroducing the fact that we are resilient and it's not the cause of the pain. And then once I took him through the screening, I could also show him, here's where I'm seeing an asymmetry, and this is where we can kind of work on to like improve, like modulate that pain. And then it kind of all comes full circle of, you can see the difference. And now I've also told you that the imaging doesn't really matter. You're like, oh, wow. All right. This doctor was just kind of like setting me up with a negative expectation that I don't even think that he like intentionally put on you, but it's something that medical professionals don't really think about or haven't thought about in the past as much as those, we call them nocebos, or those negative expectations, how much of an influence that can have on someone's mental state and then going forward their like outcomes.
Mike, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
And you don't have to get crazy into it. Is it more of a neurological thing, the pain stuff? Because we all know it's all relative.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So pain is all about sensitivity and basically how your brain and nervous system are perceiving a threat. So the big job of our brain and nervous system is basically to just protect us, right? Keep us safe. So when we start to perceive a threat, we start to kind of lock that tissue down, or well, now I'm getting ahead of myself. So basically pain is an output from the brain, right? So it's an experience, and it's kind of based on that perception of threat, like I was talking about. So once your body starts to perceive that there's a threatful situation, it puts this output of pain to make you do something about it. So you have to change something. But like I said before, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's damage. One of the analogies that I really like to make it like break it down is, think about like your body is a house and your nervous system is the house alarm. So one night someone breaks in and they do some damage, your alarm system starts going off, right? You want it to go off, and that makes sense because it's alerting you to damage. So the next day you repair the house, and then sometime next week a squirrel is jumping from house to house, lands on your house, and the alarm system starts going off in the exact same way. The squirrel wasn't doing any damage unless it was a really fat ass squirrel. So that the reason the alarm system went off the same way was because that threshold was lowered and it's more sensitive to that input. So there wasn't any damage from the squirrel. It was just that alarm system hadn't been set to what it should be set to.
And is that due to just that minor previous tear is the first alarm? And then could you say that second alarm is that the doctor saying this is why? It's more of a subconscious thing.
Yeah, so I think that it's, the tear could have been the first alarm, but more so it's usually like a movement or position that kind of starts it. So it wasn't necessarily like the tear, it's more of what positions he got sensitized to. So for that specific example, like going overhead was a sensitized position because he had done it so often. And it's so basically the brain will take, we call it like a neurotag. So imagine like every time you do something that you don't, or your body perceives as a little threat, your body basically takes like a little snapshot picture of it, and it says, this is a neurotag. We don't like this anymore, right? So every time you do it, it kind of builds up on itself. And then eventually there's going to be enough perceived threat that that's when that pain output gets thrown out. It's like, hey man, we've done this too much. We need to do something else. Because the brain and nervous system really love novel input. So that would be like, you just have to kind of move in a different direction, get to like offset that perceived threat. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah,
Very
Okay.
Mike,
cool.
it's I don't know if you knew, but I'm going to medical school in the fall.
I
And so
did. Yeah,
this
I saw that.
question's yeah, so this is very
Congrats.
directed at thank you very much. But this is for my own curiosity. What would you recommend to the doctor in that situation? I'm not going to be doing imaging, like I don't find radiology that
Mhm.
interesting. But how would you suggest like a doctor present said image to a patient? Like if they had seen those impressions, how could they switch their wording maybe to make the patient experience more positive or to be a little more versed on like what it actually means?
Yeah, of course. And I think Clash actually, I listened to Clash's podcast with you guys, and that was great. And I think they
Mhm.
touched upon this a little bit of no one really explains to you that like tissue damage heals, even if there is tissue damage. And then outside of that fact, there's a lot of times that I think that people are taking imaging without like it's not needed. Um,
Mhm.
and that's actually something I did want to get into a little bit was direct access too. They mentioned that as well. There's a lot of unnecessary imaging that gets taken because just because you're in pain doesn't mean that we need to see what's going on. It doesn't tell you how you're moving or feeling. So it's not going to give you the full picture. Um, and that's actually a good segue into direct access is kind of, I think that people who are in pain should be coming to see a physical therapist first because you have that
Mhm.
option. You don't need a doctor referral or to even go see the doctor at all. Because a lot of times there's a high correlation with advanced imaging and going into surgery just because of that fact that the doctor will be able to say, look at this, like this is causing your
Mhm.
pain. We can go in and take this out. And it kind of helps people buy into that, but it's not really the root cause of what's going on. So it's kind of this, double hand or double bladed sword where it's like you go in, get the imaging because that's what they think is needed. And then you end up going down this route of, you're not really taking care of the actual problem.
I would yeah, I mean you hit the nail on the head, right? It's about going through the hierarchy of treatment. And I think that natural homeostasis needs to be first. I think preventative medicine kind of needs to be a pillar in the medical world. And just as a suggestion, I'm sure you've thought of this, I would try to consult with as many osteopathic physicians as you can. The school that I got into is a DO school, and a main reason I chose that, aside from like they gave me the first acceptance, I want to have the lens of I don't ever want to make a decision of like, oh, we're going to streamline care and you're going to go from office to imaging to surgery to specialist. Like that's
Yeah,
totally backwards to me. So just as
that's
a
good to
suggestion,
hear.
if you haven't done it, I would get in touch with DOs because they have training on neuromuscular manipulation. A whole third of what they're doing is basically in-depth chiropractic.
That's awesome.
So it could help you. I mean, they're just much more open in the current landscape to referring to PT first.
Yeah,
As a
absolutely.
suggestion.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
I I think too, I think we can all agree people have taken a look at their health with the pandemic. I think before that, the whole holistic medicine and being more proactive in care was slowly gaining traction.
Mhm.
And now the pandemic kind of put a focus on that. So I think it's going to move in the right direction, especially with well-educated people like yourself, Jake, in the medical field and getting into it and understanding the body can kind of heal itself. You just have to give it time and really understand the root cause, like you said, Mike. My question to you, Mike, you're still kind of early in your career, young guy. What has been, what is the biggest challenge in terms of like de-educating someone or having someone trust you about, hey, you don't necessarily need to get surgery or have that doctor tell you exactly what to do. Let's try and find, what's the cause? What's been the biggest challenge? I don't want to say convincing, but just showing the value you can provide.
No, it absolutely is convincing because it's tough when you have someone who, everyone looks up to as a doctor. And
Mhm.
sometimes, it's been a discussion for a while of like are PTs really doctors? And we are, but it's just in some people's minds, it doesn't hold the same value. So when a doctor says, look at this imaging, there's something wrong, you inherently go, oh wow, like why would he be wrong about
Yeah.
this? What I think it almost creates more of a niche for me, I think, because people that I see for the most part have already gone to the doctor. They've already gone and seen another physical therapist, and they're looking for that last ditch effort of like, I really don't want to have surgery. Like this just doesn't fit with my like values. They're like, I really want to find a natural solution, and that's what I provide. So it almost, I wouldn't like it doesn't feed into that niche, I guess, but it kind of isn't a challenge either, because when they come to me, they're like, I've already tried these other routes and it hasn't worked. So then what I say to them to kind of de-educate what the other medical providers have said, they kind of already are buying in because they're like, these other things didn't work.
Right. And everyone would rather, fix it holistically at that root cause without a scalpel, right? And
Absolutely, yeah.
I personally would too. So, and I think also, after the surgery, the amount of time you're going to have to heal, depending on whatever the surgery is, you could have, been tenfold of what you would be in your terms of your progress doing physical therapy. I think that's a huge point too.
Yeah, I think on top of that too, a lot of times, like we talked about, pain isn't tissue damage or like those abnormalities in the imaging. So when they go in and do surgery, it's not actually fixing what's causing the pain. You never reset that alarm system for your house. So people are not only set back, like you said, but it's also you didn't fix that root cause. So you just end up going through surgery and then dealing with it. And then you're also deconditioned on top of that.
Mike, quick question, because I've been wondering this myself, and it's a really hard thing to answer, but because you're in the field, you could probably help. In terms of like using the baseline of preventative care, and we're talking about like, essentially we'll call it pro or anti-surgery at this point, when is the breaking point of you saying, okay, it's time to repair? Like, when does it become appropriate? Like, when have you exhausted all options? Because I have a very hard time conceptualizing when that is, because I'm kind of torn between wanting to do things from a more rehabilitative sense, and I work in an IM office, so their natural instinct is surgery consult,
Yeah, that's tough too. Honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with the patient's kind of expectations as well. So I have worked with someone who, we were making a little bit of progress, but it wasn't quite as fast as they expected. And then, they really bought into the surgery, and I'm not going to make your decision for you, right? Like, I'm going to influence you, and here are the facts, here are the studies that show all of this stuff. But if you really buy into this worked for, my family member, and then this other person I know and whatever, that placebo almost sometimes becomes like a big enough factor. They're going into it thinking, I'm going to get better. This is what's going to help. And like we talked about before with the nocebos, those negative expectations, if it's that powerful of a placebo, I almost think that, I'm not going to push them towards surgery, but it's kind of a tough, if they've made up their mind, I'm not going to continually fight it. You know what I mean? But from a tissue standpoint, I would honestly say that it depends on your goals. So if you are, say, like Conor McGregor, when he tore his ACL, like, he's going to want to go get that repaired because he wants to fight at a very, very high level consistently. He's going to put that under a ton of stress all the time, like peak levels all the time. If you want to get back to like, being in the gym and doing just some like health and wellness stuff, I don't necessarily think that you have to go for the repairs. So it's kind of just playing it by ear of what are their goals? What is the situation right now? Like, there's a lot of factors going on. One example I just thought of, actually, I'm working with an ankle sprain who's a grade 3 ankle sprain, both CFL and ATFL, which basically means they're completely, for the listeners, they're completely torn ligaments. And she's 5 weeks, we've been working together, and she's back to a lot of the activities that she wants to do, but she's not also going in and doing like MMA stuff, or like very high level, so it really depends on what their goals are and where they're at.
Okay. That answers it perfectly. Dan, I'll switch to you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's also just a case by case, I'm sure, Mike.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So a post that I wanted to talk about that I freaking loved was the latest one you had about the woman with her foot.
Oh yeah.
Can you
Oh
just,
yeah.
that
That
was
was probably
like,
one of my favorite cases to do too.
so,
She was an awesome patient.
yeah, so just set the scene, the context, and we'll just go right into it. I think this is what I really
Agreed.
wanted.
This was great. Yeah.
I think this kind of like you guys are saying, this kind of sums up everything we've been talking about
Yeah.
between like direct access and the surgery and like when, you know, all of the nocebos and stuff like that. So basically, this patient had been dealing with foot pain, like pretty severe foot pain since January of this year. She used to run and like walk her dog. She used to do parkour, all of this active stuff. So when she came to see me, it was, I'm trying to think. I can't remember exactly how long ago it was, but it was pretty recent. So it had been a while. It was chronic foot pain at that point. So she had been to her doctor. They told her, you know, basically go to PT. It made it worse because all they were doing is working on the actual foot. They were chasing the symptoms, as I said in that post. She went back to her doctor because it made it worse. They did some imaging. They couldn't, thank God, they couldn't find anything because I told her later that could have been one of those nocebos of we need to do surgery here because this is the problem. They couldn't find anything. They offered her surgery anyway for whatever reason. Somebody's got to pay for the like Cayman Island house. So she ends up coming to me. She basically she, you know, I did a lot of that de-education we were talking about of, you know, they found nothing on the imaging. Pain is an output. It's an experience. It doesn't have to be like this one thing. There doesn't have to be an injury. It can be a whole ton of things. And she, like we talked about before, she kind of bought into that because she's been through all these other cycles of people who are just like, they told her it was in her head and like she's kind of, you know, like not making it up, but it's like her fault that she's in pain, which is crazy. So I take her through, I like to do a whole lower quarter screen for whatever is like the trouble because the lower body ends up working as a chain because it's connected to the ground. So if an issue at your hip could be causing an issue at your knee, it could be causing an issue in your foot. So I take her through the screen and there's an issue or an asymmetry at her like lumbar spine, basically her lower back. And we started treating that. And after like 20 shift corrections, she's like, wow, that feels better. So that was a big buy-in. We did a couple more. We basically spent the whole session doing that. And by the end of the week, she texted me that she had had her first pain-free day since January. And she was just like out of this world excited.
So it was about a week from seeing you till no foot pain.
Yeah. And that was, well, granted, that was no foot pain with like standing, but she had been like throbbing pain with standing. She had trouble walking. It took about 2 weeks until we were getting back into like running and parkour and stuff like that. But pain, like we talked about before, pain is very easy to modulate because it's an output. So it's not like tissue damage. So if you find the right things and the root cause of the problem, you can modulate it very, very quickly.
So as
Mike,
you're doing,
yeah.
go-
No, you go, Dan. It's fine.
as you're doing those lumbar, I think you said lumbar spine kind of